When we think about surgery, we picture this world of incredible precision and science, right? But what if I told you that one of the most common steps, a step done millions of times a year, was based more on, well, tradition than actual evidence? What if a tiny little change in how a surgeon stitches someone up could prevent a huge complication for thousands and thousands of people? Well, today, that's what we're digging into. We're looking at the simple act of closing an incision and how challenging the voodoo that we do can literally change everything. So get this. Every single year, right here in the United States, surgeons perform more than 2 million laparotomies. That's just the fancy medical term for an open abdominal surgery, where they make that big incision, usually right down the middle, to get to the organs. It's about as fundamental as it gets in modern medicine.
But here is the really shocking part. After that super common procedure, a staggering 26% of patients, that's more than 1 in every 4, end up with something called an incisional hernia. It's where the abdominal wall gets weak and tissue or even organs start to bulge through. It's painful, it's a mess, and yeah, it often means you're heading back for another surgery to fix it. So you have to ask, why is this happening so often? The answer, it turns out, takes us right to the heart of surgical tradition. It's all about a long-held belief on the best way to stitch that incision closed. This is a classic showdown, tradition versus evidence, or as some surgeons call it, surgical dogma.
And this quote on the slide just says it all. The tradition of suturing with 1 centimeter bites remains surgical dogma for many. See, this method wasn't really based on modern science, it was just passed down, mentor to student for generations, until it became this unquestioned rule. The idea behind it was intuitive, but as we're about to see, it was just deeply, deeply flawed. The thinking was, to make it strong, you gotta go big.
So let's break down what this large bites technique actually is. You're using a thick, kind of heavy-duty suture. Then the surgeon takes these really big bites of the fascia. That's the tough connective tissue that basically holds your abdominal wall together. We're talking at least the centimeter, which is 10 millimeters, from the edge. And they also leave about a centimeter between each stitch. The logic kind of seems to make sense, right? A thick rope and big, beefy anchors should make a stronger wall.
So in one corner, you have the reigning champ, the old way, the large bites technique. It was seen as the strong method. It was fast, it was robust, it was just how things were done. But in the other corner, science was getting ready to step into the ring, ready to challenge that long-held belief with some cold, hard evidence.
And that leads us to the main event, a huge clinical trial, and they gave it the perfect name, the Stitch Trial. It was specifically designed to finally put this surgical dogma to a really tough scientific test. This wasn't going to be about opinions or old habits anymore. This was going to be about data.
And the Stitch trial was no joke. It was the absolute gold standard of medical research. It was randomized, so patients were put into groups just by chance. It was double-blind, meaning neither the patient nor the surgeon knew which technique they were using. And it happened at multiple hospitals. This wasn't about one surgeon's pet theory. This was about finding a truly unbiased scientific answer. And the answer? Wow, it was a total knockout. Just look at this chart. That bar on the left? After 1 year, 21% of patients who got the traditional large bites closure developed a hernia. Now look at the small bites group on the right. Only 13%. That huge drop wasn't a coincidence. It was a clear, statistically significant win for the new way of thinking.
Let's just put that into perspective for a second. This incredibly simple change in how the surgeon put in the stitches cut the relative risk of getting a hernia by nearly 50%. That's an enormous improvement from such a seemingly minor change. And it really forces us to ask the big question, why was the old way so wrong?
And this table just lays out the old busted myths perfectly. Myth number 1, thicker sutures are stronger. The evidence? Actually, thinner sutures cause less damage to the tissue, which means it heals better. Myth number 2, large bites are more secure. Turns out these big, spaced-out bites can literally strangle the tissue by cutting off its blood supply. That's a condition called ischemia, and it makes the healing tissue weaker, not stronger. And finally, the myth that you just need to pull it super tight. The reality? Too much tension messes up the healing process. The entire foundation of the old way was just plain wrong.
Okay, so with those old myths totally busted, let's build the correct, evidence-based technique from the ground up. This is the small bites principle, and it's all about being delicate, not forceful.
It all comes down to 4 key steps. First, the suture you choose matters. You use a slowly absorbable monofilament, which basically just means it's a single, smooth strand, not braided, so it causes less trauma going through the tissue. Second, you take much smaller bites, just 5 to 8 millimeters from the edge. Step 3, the stitches are placed way closer together,
only about 5 millimeters apart. And finally, step 4. You have to follow what we can call the golden ratio.
And this ratio is absolutely critical. It's simply the total length of suture you use divided by the length of the wound itself. The goal is to hit a ratio of at least 4:1. Now, why is that so important? Well, because using that much more thread with smaller, closer stitches spreads the tension out evenly across the whole incision. It gets rid of those pressure points that kill the tissue. In fact, if you drop below that 4:1 ratio, the risk of a hernia triples. Triples.
So the evidence is pretty overwhelming, right? The STCH trial was published in a major medical journal back in 2015. So, case closed. Everybody should have switched right away. Well, this is where the story gets a little frustrating.
It's pretty incredible, but years after this definitive evidence came out and after the guidelines were updated, a lot of surgeons just haven't changed how they do things. In some fields, fewer than 1 in 3 surgeons have actually adopted the small bites technique. That old dogma, the voodoo that we do, is proving to be really, really hard to get rid of. And this chart just drives the point home. I mean, look at the difference. On one hand, you've got colorectal surgeons, where about 2/3 of them are following that crucial 4:1 ratio. That's pretty good. But then you look at OBGYNs, and the number just plummets to 1/3. It's a perfect example of how even clear, life-saving evidence can get stuck in silos and not spread evenly across medicine. And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. We're talking about a simple, routine step in a super common surgery. For decades, the way we did it was not just not the best, it was actively causing harm. And even after we knew better, the change has been painfully slow. It really makes you wonder, if the evidence was this crystal clear for something so fundamental, what other traditions, in medicine and everywhere else, are we still following just because that's the way we've always done it?